Welcome to the Answers Yes podcast, where we interview some of the most interesting people that have said yes to opportunities in their life. We hope that through these stories, you can learn to create your own destiny by saying yes along the way. Join us as we explore the new series covering topics such as passion, integrity, and hard work. I'm your host, Jim Riley, and I hope you enjoy these interviews as much as I do. I believe that everyone has an important message worth hearing. Hello and welcome to the Answers Yes podcast. Thank you for tuning in. It's a pleasure to have you. And just all the comments I've gotten recently, we've had some really terrific guests. And I want to thank some of the PR agencies that's reached out to me over the years. They've brought wonderful guests. And if you are one of those agencies, I put a hold on that for about, 3 or 4 months. We'll start ramping your guests back up in August. But for now, what I'm doing is interviewing people that I've encountered in the last several years or throughout my career that are of interest to me specifically, whether that's their story, their business leadership, or what value they bring to society. And that's exactly what we're going to do today. Some of the benefit of me getting on the road and traveling, which I haven't done much of recently because, well, you all know I love Montana and I don't like to leave here. I went to the furthest thing from Montana. I left and went halfway across the country to the big city of big state of New Jersey. And I was on the shoreline and I met so many wonderful people. And as life turns out, you wind up in a quiet room, in this particular case, smoking cigars, drinking good whiskey with incredible people. And I met today's guest, Domi Quagila, and I'm just so happy to have you here, Domi. Thank you for being on the show.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm really excited.
We sat there and it was late and your husband's across the room and he introduced you to me. He's like, she's got a story to tell you. You got to listen to it. And, I'm sitting in the corner enjoying myself. What I'm going to say, no.
He's like my biggest advocate. I know, just putting me out there like that.
He's such a great person. It was a pleasure to meet him. And I'm really excited for the life that you're building together, your family. You guys were talking about the upcoming wedding and what you're going to do and who's invited and all these things. And I just loved that point in my life, finding my soulmate. And so congratulations on that.
Thank you so much.
What is it about Trevor that struck you first?
So we were friends for a long time before we started dating, and he's just a very charismatic person. And I don't just say that because he's my fiance. I really think that people are just drawn to him.
Mm-hmm.
And we do have a similar background. We kind of could relate, on our stories and how we grew up. And I think we got close through that. And he's just my biggest fan, my biggest encourager. He's an awesome person. I'm glad you got the chance to meet him too. He's great.
Well, having some experience in relationships in my 50s now, you're doing all the right things. You've found each other for the right reasons, and it resonates when I saw you together. And there's no question why he's successful in real estate. And we'll put in the show notes how to get a hold of him. But he's had great success out there. He's got great coaches like Ryan Robbins, who was the one that encouraged me to come out to New Jersey and meet so many great people. But today's show is about you and your story. And there we were sitting in literally this smoke-filled cigar room. It was so small. People, it was like, you can't go up there. There's too many people. I haven't been in a cigar room for a long time. I do appreciate them. I don't smoke them very often. I can't handle, the way that your mouth tastes the next day for the next week.
Yeah.
But the company was too good not to be in the room. And that's when we sat down and the conversation ended in tears. And I want to say up front, I'm so appreciative for your honesty and your willingness to open up and share. And you had such a compelling story. And I know that your goal is to tell that story. So is this the first time you're going to tell it to a really large audience?
This is the first time. The first time. So I'm a little bit nervous, but I'm also excited. I heard something when we were at the event actually, and I can't remember if Chase said it or if Keaton said it, but all my life I had said, I just want to help people. And I don't know what that looked like or in what aspect I was going to do that in. But he said, you have the ability, if you have the ability to help people and you're not doing it, you're being selfish. And
Yeah.
that resonated with me because I was like, I do have a good story and I do feel like I could help people. And so why am I not doing that? You know what I mean? So I'm excited
Great
to be
point.
here and get it out there.
Well, if you're listening, now's the time where you put that seatbelt on and really listen up, because Domi has an incredible story of fortitude and life-changing moments. And I do believe that you're going to be able to help people through your story. And I intentionally wanted to talk about your relationship with Trevor first, and how your life is today. And we could talk about that forever, because there's so many great things that I learned about you that you're doing now. Let's go all the way back to your childhood and the story that you want to tell. I'm going to give you the virtual mic here, and let's start where you started with me.
Okay. So my parents met in rehab, and that's where I was conceived. So once I got out of rehab, they had me, things were going all right. They got pregnant with my brother shortly after. They had my brother. And unfortunately, my dad, fell back into addiction. So he was drinking a lot. He was going out. He ended up in jail. So my mom took me and my brother and moved us to Elizabeth. If you know New Jersey, Elizabeth is a pretty scary town.
Well, describe it a little bit, because our listeners are really from around the world. When you say scary, what does that mean in your mind?
So, on the streets, drugs, prostitution, gangs, just not a good area, not an area to raise children, in my opinion.
Sure.
So we were there, and my mom kind of kept in contact with my dad's family. And then she herself fell back into drugs and alcohol. And so she had this friend, his name was Danny. We knew him as Danny. I was only 3, my brother was 2. And my dad's family knew this guy. I thought he was just like a good family friend. And he would like take us back to my grandparents' house on the weekends once in a while. For my mom, like do pick up and drop off. And there was one weekend where my grandpa took us back to a gas station to meet my mom to pick us up, and she just never showed up.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't come back to get us. So my grandpa was calling, couldn't get a hold of anyone. He finally got a hold of this guy, Danny, and truth comes out. Danny was actually her pimp, who was like basically raising us. And, he told my grandpa, these kids can't stay here. This isn't safe. She's leaving them home in the house alone. At that point, I was only 3, and I was like making my little brother rice in a microwave. And I have a daughter now, and she's 3. And Trevor and I were talking, and he brought up a good point. He was like, could you imagine if Riley had to do that?
Yeah.
And in my eyes, she's a baby. So I could never imagine her having to take care of even herself, let alone a little sibling.
So Domi, real quick, and by the way, because this is vocal only, you don't have the luxury of seeing Domi's beautiful face, but she's young, and I'm sure her memory's far fresher than mine is at 55. So, I know that these memories still ring true to you and where you're at. Do you remember anything about what that home looked like? What was home? What was it, an apartment? Was it the back of the gas station? Was it a trailer? Give us an idea of what that looked and felt like in your mind.
Yeah, so I was pretty young, but there's like a few memories that do stick out. And I just remember it was kind of almost like a back house, like a house like behind someone's house.
Mm-hmm.
It was dirty. My mom was in and out. And I just can remember like being home alone, like at 3 years old, with my little brother. And I honestly have more memories with this guy, Danny, than I do with my mom with us all the time.
So Danny comes clean with your grandparents that he was your mom's pimp.
Yeah. Yeah. And they had no idea. And my grandpa's like, he's a pretty straight shooter. Like he doesn't take any shit. And he was shocked. I mean, they never would have been sending us back every weekend if they knew what was going on there. And I think it's just, how bad was it that a pimp was the one saying, these kids can't come back here?
Yeah. And your mom was a victim of drugs and alcohol. I mean, look, we know right now there's a fentanyl crisis in this country.
Yeah.
And your dad, same, right?
Yeah. Yep. Both drugs and alcohol. And then like my mom unfortunately fell into prostitution, I guess,
Hmm. All right. So your grandpa gets the message. What happens from there? Obviously, we can't send them back, right?
We can't send him back. So we lived with my grandparents for a year. My dad got out of jail at that time. So he
Mhm.
was living with us too. He worked in the city, he did construction. So I can remember like my grandpa would wake us up late at night and we would go to the train station. We were all excited to see my dad picking him up from work and he just wouldn't show up.
Mm.
And this happened so often. We would go, we'd wait for him. We were excited. He just wouldn't show up. And what else are my grandparents going to do? You know what I mean? They had these two kids, their son's kids. They weren't just going to put us on the street. So we lived with them. And at that point, I think my dad, he'd gotten a little bit better, a little more on his feet. He met a girl, they were engaged. We moved to Long Island in New York.
Mm-hmm.
And we would still see my family every once in a while. And still, he was struggling, drugs, alcohol, domestic violence. I can remember them fighting. We had this like little attic upstairs, and every time they would fight, me and my brother would go up there and his fiance would send us up there and we would just hide, and you could hear them screaming at each other downstairs. It was horrible. The police would come. So it got to a point where he was in jail, and my grandpa got a call from foster care and they said, we're in New York. We have these two kids. They're your grandkids. They're in foster care. Their dad's been arrested. And my grandpa was like, how do I come get them? Like, what do I need to do to get these kids? So we're in foster care for probably like 3 days. And at this point, I was about 5. My brother's 4. And I can remember being there. It was like a house. There were probably like 12 other kids there. And just, I don't know if any of the listeners, about foster care situations, but unfortunately that's the case a lot of the times. It's not like you're the only kids going to a house. There can be multiple kids there.
Yeah.
So my aunt, my dad's sister, and my grandpa, they, I remember my aunt she said to my uncle, what do we do? And he was like, well, what do you mean? What do? You go get them. And they already had 2 kids of their own. And she was like, are you sure you want to do this? Like, we already have 2 kids. This is 2 more kids. They're my brother's children. Are you sure you want to do this? He said, absolutely. We're not leaving them there.
Yeah.
So they came and got us. And I remember my aunt she said, it was just so heartbreaking to see you. You didn't even want to come with us. And I think about it now, like how I must have felt at that time, like a 5-6-year-old kid. My mom left. She never came back. I didn't know where my dad was. I was in this house with people I didn't know. I'm sure I was scared, confused, feeling of abandonment. So we went home with them and moved in with my aunt and uncle.
Did you feel defeated? Is that maybe why you just didn't know how to feel at the time?
Yeah, I mean, I think I was forced to grow up way quicker than a normal child. I don't think I really had a childhood, and I had no one to rely on. The 2 people in my life who were supposed to love me and care about me and take care of me weren't doing that.
Mm-hmm.
So as a child, it's like, how do you digest that,
Especially at that age. And what do you recall your brother feeling or acting, or his emotions?
Yeah, he was always super quiet. Everyone used to joke when we were little, I was like his mom. Like you would ask him a question and I would answer for him. I think and I still to this day am just super protective of him. I had to take care of him. I didn't have any other choice. He was a baby. I was a baby taking care of my baby brother.
Mm-hmm.
But I know, I'm sure he was scared. He struggles with it still to this day. It was hard, but I'm proud of where we both are now. I think Trevor actually showed me Ed Milet's podcast when we first started dating. I had never heard of Ed Milet. And the first episode I listened to, Ed had said, life happens for you, not to you. And I kind of laughed because I was like, I've been saying that my whole life, just in a different way. So, hearing that, that's kind of what like got me on this drive. Like, I can help people. I have a story to tell. I feel like that statement, life happens for you, not to you, is just how I've tried to live my life.
Yeah. And I have to commend your aunt and uncle for looking at, the situation in front of them and stepping up to the plate. I've got a very good friend here in Montana, similar situation, no pimp involved, but, extended family, loses the kids because of drugs, no alcohol, drugs. And the kids are like, what do you do with the kids? And my friend's, he's in his late 70s. All of a sudden he's taking care of two elementary kids. He's like, this wasn't our plan,
No.
but what do we do? So I have to commend your aunt and uncle for stepping up to the plate. And,
Absolutely.
I'm looking at the result of, their parenting and their willingness to do that. So aunt and uncle, if you're listening, thank you
Absolutely.
from everybody. It's hard to do that. We all have our own plans. And I think that there's a lesson within that too, is we all have our own plans in life. And sometimes God just throws something different our way. Mm-hmm. And we have to realize that it's part of a much larger picture that we don't understand at the moment. So pretty amazing.
Yeah. I mean, I'm so thankful for them. I would not be where I am now in my life if it weren't for them. And it wasn't easy. I was a kid with a lot of trauma. I was in therapy for, throughout my whole life just to try to work through that. But it wasn't easy. They did the best they could with what they had. And I'm really thankful for them.
Yeah. And I'm sure your brother's same, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, we both wouldn't be where we are now.
So here you are living on your own now with Trevor. And you look back on your life. What are some of the major lessons that you learned that you're going to incorporate into that help for others?
So I think really when you go through something like that in life, you have two choices. Either you can feel bad for yourself and think, why is this happening to me? Why have I been dealt this horrible life? Why are what did I do to deserve this? And you can dwell on that and feel bad for yourself and end up like your parents, or you can take all of that and use it as a drive to, become something they weren't. So I feel like I just want to help people out there who feel like they have no other option and, oh, this is the life I was given. This is the path I'm on. This is just how I'm going to end up. That's not how your life needs to be. And it doesn't matter if you're 10, you're 20, 30, 40. I don't think it's ever too late to, turn your life around and end up on the right path.
So Domi, you already mentioned that you weren't the easiest kid for your aunt and uncle to deal with.
No.
Can you talk about maybe some of the struggles that you had personally within your own mind and soul during that period of time and the wrestling that you had to do with your past? I mean, were there times where you're like, well, I can just be like my mom and dad. I don't care. I'm just going to go off and do whatever. Did you have those struggles, or were you always, I'll never be them, although you were a rebel? I mean, what were some of the things that went through your heart at the time, of growing up?
Yeah. So I never had the mindset of I'm just going to be my parents. I feel like I always was the opposite. I didn't want to be anything like them. And I wanted to make something of myself. And especially now that I have a daughter, I always thought, I was like, you know what, maybe one day when I have kids, I'll understand more why my mom just walked away, why my dad didn't choose me and my brother, why we weren't a priority. And then I had Riley, my daughter, and I actually felt the exact opposite because I was like, how do you do that to your kid?
Mm-hmm.
How do you just walk away from your child and never look back? I could not fathom that. So I think I struggled with that a little bit when I was younger. It was hard to let anybody in, naturally, psychology. I thought everybody was just going to leave. I didn't have anybody consistent in my life. So it was hard. I battled my aunt and uncle. I think I was just angry at times. I rebelled, like normal teenage stuff. It wasn't anything like severe. But I definitely struggled internally just with like the thoughts of not having parents. It was hard. Like, I'd go to a friend's house or I'd have friends over and having to explain to people like why I live with my aunt and uncle. That was hard as a kid.
Mm-hmm. How did that feel?
It hurt. I also think I always, the plan was to always go back with my dad. We were always going to move back in with my dad. And my uncle thought that too. It wasn't a permanent situation. And then when I was 9, he ended up passing away.
Your
He had
dad.
he had a massive heart attack. And I remember my aunt said he called her a few days before he died. Um, and he just thanked her for everything. Thanked her for raising us, just for being the person that she was. He wasn't easy on her. Although he wasn't raising us, he always had something to say. He was calling her, "Oh, you need to do this with them. You need to do that with them." So he wasn't easy. But it was almost like ironic that a few days before he died, he ended up calling her and just thanking her for everything she did. It was almost like subconsciously, maybe he knew his time was almost up here. So that was a harsh reality for me too. Like, okay, this is my life now. I don't have parents. I'm going to be living with my aunt and uncle for the rest of my life. And I'm alone. So that was a hard pill to swallow.
How'd your brother take it?
I don't think he was ever as vocal as I was. Like I said, he was a pretty quiet kid. And he kind of just internalized everything. But, I know he was just as heartbroken as I was.
Hmm. I had 3 big questions for you. It's going to probably take us to the end of the show. But the first one is, if you had contact with your mom today, if situations were different, what would you say to her?
So my mom actually did reach out to me. She found me on Facebook, probably when I was like 17. And
So not too long ago.
yeah, 10 years ago. Yeah. And she, I had always wondered, like, you still wonder about your mom. I hadn't seen her since I was 3 years old. I wondered where she was, what she was doing. And she unfortunately is still, on and off drugs. She still battles addiction. And she kind of came off a little bit abrasive when I wasn't super open to talking to her. In my mind, I had kind of closed that chapter of my life. And after seeing, the state she was in, that wasn't something I was willing to reopen, a door I was willing to reopen. And she kind of, told me I was lucky to live the life I lived with my aunt and uncle. I shouldn't be so angry at her. She did her best, and, I didn't really have anything else to say to that. So that was that.
You know where she's at today?
I do. Yeah.
Still in the same place, huh?
Still in the same place. She had another son. So I do have a half brother out there. I think he lives with her. I'm pretty sure. I could find her on social media. I just, I choose not to.
Yeah. Do you forgive her?
I do. I don't think I hold a grudge against her. That's just not a relationship that I'm willing to have. I already grieved her. I already, I've been through that. So that's not something I'm willing to reopen, but I do forgive her. I'm happy where I'm at in life now. So there's no grudge to hold.
Similar question. What's your message to your dad if he were alive today?
I think I would thank him for just, he did the best he could with what he had. Do I wish he was better? Absolutely. But I think he really had a lot of demons that he was fighting. And that was hard for him. So I would just tell him I love him. I'm sorry that he never got the help that he needed and deserved. And then I love him.
Mm. Wow. Okay. So you've alluded to wanting to help other people through your story. The reason why it resonated with me so much, especially the night that we met, is that when I look around the country right now, as I already said, there's a fentanyl crisis. I mean, I live in Montana. We are, according to our attorney general, whom I spoke with a few weeks ago, personally, we are a target state. Your story, as unique as it is to you, is not unique around the country. There's a lot of people hurting, even in our little rural town here on the biking trail going into town where the bridge is. There's a dozen people that live under that bridge that are strung out on drugs and alcohol. Even Easter, I had a friend go through there and he ran into all 12 of them. There they were, right? You talk about helping through your story. In your mind, as you work through this process and expand on giving that help, what does that help look like for you? Are you going to write a book? Are you going to, are you going to speak to women's groups? What's swirling through your head? Because we want to follow your story. We want to give people hope and understand that they can survive what they're going through.
Absolutely. So I am going to write a book. I'm working on that. I'm in the process of getting all of my thoughts together in one spot and, writing that out. This is all new to me. Like I said, my whole life, people ask you, what do you want to be when you grow up? What do you want to do? I always said, I just want to help people. So I was a teacher for a while. And while I loved that, I loved working with the children. I was like, I want more. Yes, you are helping the children. I give all the kudos to teachers. They're amazing. I wanted to do more. So I majored in psychology and I was like, I don't want to sit in a room as a psychologist. And I feel like there's so much more out there. I can get my story so much farther. So I'm going to start with the book. My story might have came off a little bit jumbled today. This is my first time ever telling it. I was a little bit nervous, but I don't know what it looks like. Women's groups, absolutely. I feel like I obviously can relate to women who are struggling just because I dealt with that personally in my life. Children, I would love to help children and just let them know like they're impressionable when they're younger, especially, the high school age. I would just love to give them encouragement and know you are not where you came from. You can make so much more of yourself. So yeah, we're in the process of trying to figure all this out and figure out how I move forward and how I can reach a bigger audience.
Well, if you're listening, the reason why I wanted Domi on the show today, and you've done great today on the show, so don't worry about what you felt to be jumbled up. We got the point across. There is so much more to your story that we talked about, and twists and turns and ups and downs, and a little bit more than what we can share on the show today. And I hope you write that book, and I hope that you get out there. I know that you were at the leadership conference for a reason, and I think what came out of it is exactly what you said in the beginning of the show. And I believe that it was Keaton that said, if you got a story to tell and you're not helping others, what are you doing?
Yeah, it's selfish.
Yeah, it's selfish. So I think it resonated with you, and I appreciate that's where your mind is at, because so many people will attend and not do anything with those thoughts that they have. And this is the first real big step to achieving that goal of helping others. And, and again, I know a lot more of the story than what you were able to tell here. And I'm happy for your willingness and desire to get it out there. I guess my last, probably the toughest question is, what do you say to that woman that's on the corner that you can tell she's probably has a pimp in the background and she's strung out on drugs, and you're walking by and you're reaching your hand out to her? What is it that you say to her to give her some hope to know that that's not who she has to be anymore?
That's a great question. I think it takes a lot to get through to someone who is that far deep into that. But I would let her know, this isn't the life you have to live. You do not have to be doing this. I know you think you have to be doing this, Nobody wants to be out there doing that. No one.
Yeah.
And you don't have to be. And I would love to, like I said, I'm still figuring out how to do this or just the logistics of it, but I would love to be able to help someone and pull them off the street and tell them, this isn't the life you have to live. There's so much more for you out there. And like I said before, it doesn't matter if you're in high school, if you're 20, if you're 30, if you're 40, it's never too late to turn your life around.
Domi, the world's a better place because of you and for the story you're telling. I'm just so happy that I met you on my trip out to New Jersey. A lot of people say, well, what'd you go out there for? Did you make any money? Did you sell anything? I'm like, I met some great people and I heard some great stories and I built some relationships. And if this is the only thing that comes out of my trip and journey to New Jersey, it was worth it because people are hurting and we need more people like you out there to make a difference. So I want to thank you for that sincerely. And when you get that book written and that business figured out of how you're going to help others, we want to have you back. We want to talk about it and spread that joy as well.
Absolutely.
So just thank you so much. All right. Well, we're gonna wrap it up with that. I'm gonna put some information in the show notes. And the thing that I want you to take away from this is that Domi is living that life that most of us aspire to have, and that's one with love and affection with her future husband and her daughter. I've seen it firsthand. But we all have a backstory. And I think, as she said in the beginning, is if we have the ability to help others, let's not be selfish and just give that. So, Domi, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it, Jim.
Thank you for listening to today's show. It is my pleasure and honor to interview all of the guests that have been on the Answer is Yes podcast. If you have enjoyed the show, please go on iTunes and subscribe, give a rating, or simply tell a friend about the show. We also believe in the message of our guests and the positive influence of their stories. As my own mentor and coach, David Meltzer, has taught me, spend some time every day thinking and writing about the things in your own life that you have more than enough of. You will find out how blessed we really are. Please visit my website, livelifedriven.com, for the latest updates about me and what I'm doing. Plus, I post a monthly blog about the many topics on this show. This podcast can also be found there. As I learned early on in life, what you believe is what you will achieve. Thanks, Mark Victor Hansen, and thank you, and have a great week.